In today's video, I'm going to give you lots of tips for drawing or painting houses so that you can get the perspective right without actually having to do any mathematical plotting. So this week somebody asked me, I think it was by email, they asked me if I could do more content on drawing houses, particularly sort of single story buildings, and we're going to look at that today. I'm going to give you some really simple tips that are going to enable you to get various aspects of houses right, roofs, chimneys, windows and more, all without fully having to plot everything mathematically, because let's face it, none of us want to do that. But we can understand the basic principles around these things and how they're supposed to look. So let's get started. So let us start today by discussing how much I hate my printer. Yes, the cyan has blocked, so it's only printing in red and yellow. So this is actually a red barn with a white roof, and I thought it was quite clear, but look at this. I spent ages trying to fix it, but unfortunately, if you want a video this week, the printer and its issues are going to have to wait. So I've printed in black and white because really I just want to get, a layout. I'll try and put this picture, which is much nicer in colour, I'll try and put this picture into my Facebook group in the usual album so you can have a go at it if you want to. We're just going to discuss, I'm going to move it off camera, we're just going to discuss how we draw houses. So the thing with houses is you want to think about the uprights first of all. Now, the reason that single story and two-story buildings, an average house is easier to draw than something tall is the fact that you can pretty much draw the uprights upright. So what happens on very tall buildings is that the uprights start to go in. If you've ever looked at a tower, you will have seen that happen. In fact, if you stand at the top of a tower and look down, you'll see the opposite happen. They converge, and that, of course, is the perspective. But with a standard house on the street, now, although it still happens, you'll still find that as you get above the eye line, these lines will converge. It's not extreme enough for it to notice. You can pretty much get away with drawing your uprights upright when you're drawing a house. So that's my first tip. So the next thing is to think about where your eye line might be. Now, on a photograph, you can sometimes see where the photographer's eye line is by seeing what you can see on top of. Now, roofs don't count because the roof is not flat. The roof's tipping up towards you. In fact, roofs are all different shapes and sizes. So it's better to think of your house initially as a box without a roof, and then you can just add the roof in by eye later on. So if we look at our box here, and let's think about the eye line. Now, with a standard two-story house, your eye line is likely to be about a third of the way out because that's just the average height that houses are. This one's a little taller. I think I can just about see on top of this windowsill here. And it hasn't got very many windowsills that stick out, so there aren't too many clues in this one. But let's assume that our eye line would be about a third of the way up our house. And we can just sketch it in there. You don't have to plot it, it's just something to think about, because our next tip is going to be about corners, because when you're standing on the street and you're looking at a house, they always go the same way. So when you're looking up at a corner, and as I said, we're taking the roof of this house off, so we're just looking at it as a box. When you look up at the corner, this corner will always go upwards. So if you remember, look up and the corner goes up, look down and the corner goes down. Now, is this always the case? Again, not when you're looking at things that are either extremely tall or you're looking up at something. So for example, if you were looking up at a little house that was sat up on a mountain, you might find that both of the corners would go up. Of course, you wouldn't necessarily see the bottom corner, but if you're looking up at something, both of these corners would go up. So here's our house sat on a mountain. If you were looking down at something, both of the corners would go down, and then you'd see the top of the house as well. So we'd have something more like this happening. So both of the corners in the middle there are pointing down, and then whatever roof you've got going on here. So you see you're looking up, corners go up, looking down, corners go down. Again, just we're looking at that middle corner because this line here is where the house is closest to you. So we can see both walls here. So we're looking at 2-point perspective, but we're not going to worry too much about plotting that. So we've then got something like this going on. Now these angles here won't necessarily be the same. They probably won't be the same. They would only be the same if you were standing exactly in the middle and the house was exactly square, not oblong. So you'll generally find that one has got a steeper angle than the other. other, and it's usually the one that's a little bit shorter, so the wall that's shorter, in other words. Now, I'm not trying to exactly draw the house that's in front of me, I'm just giving you some principles here. The easiest way to check the actual angles of something is to line it up with the top of your paper or the side or anywhere else, and then we can just move it across. I've actually lengthened that wall a little bit just for fun. I'll shorten it and we'll make that angle a little bit steeper. And we're starting to get the shape of our house without its roof. So you might say to yourself, well, that's all right for you, Michele, but I've got shaky hands. I'm not good at drawing straight lines. They always curve off in strange directions. I'm going to need to use a ruler or a set square. Now, I advise you not to, and that's because a ruler will give you a perfect line, and the person that's looking at the picture will then expect every line to be perfect. And if anything's slightly out, it's really, really going to notice. So what you can do instead is a little hack that I've got. And what you can do is you can draw a dotted line. So imagine I want to get this upright and I can't get it to work out. What I'll do is line it up here with the bottom of my paper, and I'll just make some little dots like so. What this enables me to do is to link my dots up and still end up with a hand-drawn line, or at least one that looks hand-drawn. Now let's think about the roof. Now you can see that there is a relationship between this line here and this line here. They're both working on the same point of perspective. So what we can do is we can kind of, but not really, plot the perspective. So you can always extend a line and think to yourself, well, that would meet, and where it would meet actually is along that eye line. As I said, you don't have to plot this, and it may well be that this is off the edge of your paper anyway, but you can just get an idea. You can think, well, you know, we've got this here and we've got this here, and we're starting to plot our perspective, and that enables us to plot other things along that line. Now we've also got the roof line, and so what we can do is we can take a little point up there and take that along the same imaginary point of perspective. Now again, this varies depending on the sort of roof. I was looking at some sort of European houses when I was looking for this picture, and some of them had those old-fashioned curved roofs. I think they were barns. They were very beautiful. So your roof won't always follow the same line of perspective, but in this case it does. So what we can do is we can get that line there, and as I said, you don't have to plot all of this. It's just a matter of thinking, well, this follows some kind of perspective, so maybe we can just move it up like this. Now we took the roof of this house off, and I want to place this roof line. You can see that it's central across this area here, but because this is subject to perspective, it won't actually appear to be central. So how do we know where to plot it? Well, there's a really easy way of finding the center point of a wall that's at an angle, and we're going to use our ruler to do that, or you can use any straight line. So what I'm going to do is, for this wall here, I'm just going to take across one side to the other, and I have found the center point of this wall. So I can now take a right angle up, and that's going to tell me where my roof apex will sit. So again, I'm going to just have a look for this angle and see what it looks like. We've got the corner there, we've got the apex, and so we can plot the roof now. So I'm going to take this here like so, and we can take it down to the other corner. As I said, I'm not exactly copying the house in the picture, so the proportions may be slightly different. I'm just trying to give you principles here. So again, we have our roof, and we've got the top edge here. Now, checking that, I don't think I've done it steep enough. You can always use a bit of instinct for these things, and these lines here will also converge. At the moment, they wouldn't converge enough, so I am actually going to make that steeper here. And I'm starting to get something that looks a little bit more house-like. As I said, roofs vary. Some of them go up to a point rather than having a flat side. And you never want to judge whether you can see the top of a roof as to whether or not you're looking down at something, because they slope. So I'm just going to adjust that even further. And I'm pretty happy with that. Let's talk now about how to get things like windows and doors in place. At this halfway point, I normally ask you to click the like button and subscribe. Of course, I want you to do those things, but I'd like to say thank you today to those of you who take YouTube channel memberships. The channel membership is actually more than a quarter of my income here on YouTube. It really does help to supplement the income I make from selling painting and drawing courses. I am not wealthy, and this little bit of extra income really does help me to make free content for everybody who needs it. Now let's say we want 2 windows here and we want them evenly spaced. So I've got an idea of such a thing here. So again, I'm going to find the center point because that's just going to give me somewhere to work from. These are just guidelines which would be erased later on. So I've divided my wall into 2, and this is actually the center point, even though this side is much foreshortened. But I want to place a window in the center of each of these. So we'll do the same again. We'll find the center of these 2 sections. So in order not to confuse myself, let's erase all of these lines here. So I'm just left with these 2 here. And again, we'll find the center point. And I'll take a line up through each. Now, if you're doing a sketch, perhaps for a painting, you really don't have to go to all of this trouble. It's just an idea so that you know how things work. Now, we need to find a way of plotting where the base of the windows goes. And sometimes people make the mistake of lining up with the bottom of the house, and sometimes they line up with the top of the house. But the truth is, it's somewhere in between. So those initial lines of perspective that we have, they will go through our building like a fan. So they'll come across like this. So we can take a point anywhere there. And as I said, if it's off the paper, you could just roughly imagine whereabouts it might be. You have a lot of leeway on this. It doesn't have to be exact. So now I've got a line for our windows to sit on. Actually, let's make another line for the top of the windows. So you see how those lines don't exactly follow the roof, but quite close. What I'm going to do now is just following the rule that we made earlier is keep the uprights upright. Now you'll notice that I make less window to the right of that center line than to the left. This is going to allow for the foreshortening that would happen with the window. Let's get rid of all of our guidelines. And one thing that works really well with windows if you are shading or painting is just to sort of shade one corner. It could be top or bottom. Just getting an idea that perhaps the light is coming from the top, and you see how they start to look a little bit more three-dimensional. Perhaps we'll give them a little bit of a sill as well. We just start to get a little bit more realism. Now on the other side of this house, we've got a large window here, or could be a door or something like that. Let's put that in as well. I've still got my line there for eye lines. It'd be quite fun to use that. I've still got where I plotted my center line to be, which was here. And again, now this here is closest towards us, which means that anything in that direction will get smaller and fainter and closer together. And anything in this direction will get smaller and fainter and closer together. So we're doing like a mirror opposite. So I'm going to take a line here and go a little bit smaller the other side. And again, we've then got our door or window or whatever it is. And we start to get that lovely natural look. Next, let's talk about pathways. So one mistake that people make when taking a pathway up to a door is they take the lines too steep and they do something like this. And you end up then with the pathway looking like it tips up. So if ever anything is looking like it's tipping up, you want to flatten the angles. And what we want to do is really get an idea of the horizontalness of the landscape. So I'm going to actually curve my path round in this occasion. And you see by flattening these angles a little bit, I stop everything from tipping up. So we've got a nice pathway coming in. Let's talk about chimneys because people often do this wrong. So I've started to draw a chimney here, and I'll show you what people tend to do wrong. Is what I see a lot is I see people drawing a chimney like this. And this is when your brain takes over and your brain says, well, I know what shape a chimney is. It's got a hole in the top and, you know, smoke comes out. But the problem with this is you're looking down into the chimney. Now, you can only see down into a chimney if you are a long way above it. And we have already discovered that our eyes are here. So we're looking up at this chimney. So we can't see into the top of it. So what we're going to have instead is we're just going to have a line that goes up. And this is the same when you're drawing anything. So perhaps you're drawing, you know, a lighthouse or a tower. If you're looking up at it, which you usually are, it's going to curve like this. You're not going to see inside that tower or that chimney pot unless you are above it, like a bird flying in the sky. So the only time you would see this is if you're literally standing up on a mountain or a hill looking down. So that's just something else to be careful of. Let's think about putting a fence next to our house. So rather than having a fence up here, I think we'll have a fence that curves around like this, almost mimics the shape of the path. Now, I've already explained that things get closer together and smaller as they go into the distance. So what we can do is we can exaggerate the perspective here, and let's have our first fence post coming up like this. You could plot them again, but you could just draw them by eye as well. And let's have the second one being not as tall. Let's have the third one being even smaller and thinner, and this way closer together. Now you'd be amazed what you can get away with once you start doing things like this. You can draw anything at all, trees, fence posts, rocks, anything that's going to get smaller, thinner, fainter, shorter, closer together as it goes into the distance. So we can use that kind of perspective. You know, maybe we're drawing some rocks or something like that. Maybe they've got some nice decorative rocks arranged here on the side of the pathway. Again, we can make them get smaller and closer together as they go into the distance. Now, of course, you get anomalies. You might have a large rock here and a small one here. But these things that I call repeating motifs are going to actually give your house and your landscape a lot of depth. So always look for things that are the same size so that you can exaggerate that perspective and take the eye into the picture. And finally, remember to use that same perspective for anything decorative like roof tiles. So again, we've got this perspective coming up here. So we've got these two lines of roof that would converge like so. Might be off the paper. Haven't drawn that one very straight, have I? Let's have a go at that. And so again, if I was plotting roof tiles here, I could just start following those lines like this. And also the other way, so I could follow the lines like this. You don't have to get this exactly right, as long as you're drawing them to some extent by hand so that they're a little bit natural looking. And anything that's built by hand is going to naturally have imperfections. I think those are a little bit large for roof tiles, aren't they? But you can use these ideas of perspective to start getting the natural effect you're looking for. This channel is all about bringing you real practical help that you need with painting and drawing. So don't forget to let me know in the comments what sort of videos you would like to see me make next. And before you leave this video, don't forget to have a look in the video description. Not only is there lots of free stuff down there for you, some free downloadable PDFs, there's even some free courses that you can take. You can also find out all about my paid courses, including my best-selling Complete Beginner's Drawing, Beginner's Watercolour, and lots of single project courses where you get to make a whole painting with me. I'll put up another drawing video that you will find useful right now.